Hi, I'm Terri Simmons of Alchemy Birth and Wellness. I'm a community midwife, health educator.
And I'm DeAnna Batdorff. I'm the co-founder of the DeAnna Center with my partner, Scott Jenkins. And I am an Ayurvedic practitioner, educator, and I also have mentored many, which is what brings us together in this class. We are seasoned teachers, long histories, and we have seen many people through a lot of different areas of life and situations in life, whether that be a student of one of ours or whether that be a client of one of ours. And so we really wanted to come together and offer a course that was an immersion, something you could really immerse yourself in and you could sink your life into, your head and your heart into. And hopefully we are doing that for you. Today's topic is really about decisions, choices, and innate knowing. I'm wondering what you have to say about decision making and decisions in general.
As we know, sort of the topic of, deciding to have a child, there's a lot of decisions. I mean, even deciding to continue with a pregnancy is a decision. And we make decisions 300 times a second. I mean, there's just constantly decisions. So, we take it for granted that we are, again, seasoned decision makers in our lives. And pulling on those times when we made hard decisions can launch you into making new decisions. So I always like to think, when I'm counseling someone of how to make a decision, going back again to what your true self is and what you're taught to be. If you can make decisions from where your true self is, it's a lot easier, and they're usually, better decisions, quicker decisions. If we think and reflect back on decisions that we have made, the hard ones are usually we're struggling with what people think of us, how they're going to think of us, or what they're going to think of us, how we were raised going against that, how our cultural beliefs come in, how our political beliefs come in. All of these things, unfortunately, have guided us in ways of making decisions that aren't always positive and the best decisions for yourself. So that's first off is grounding out on, when you are going through a difficult decision, grounding out of why is it even hard to make this decision. That can alleviate a lot of pain.
I also feel like there's something big in decision making that puts us up against a wall of right and wrongs. And we have been taught very often in society that decision is going to make such an impact on who you become or how it affects other people. And I'm absolutely a believer of this. Decision making has to be conscious. But I do think often we're so afraid that we're going to make the wrong decision that we stop ourselves from making active decisions so that we can keep moving in life. There's 5 emotions for each one of the doshas in Ayurveda. And one of those emotions in Vata, which is air and ether, is indecision. And the ability to just not be embodied enough or grounded enough. And really the idea is you need to be grounded to make a really conscious decision in your life. So whether it's a big decision or these small little decisions that Terry's speaking of that are like constantly every moment of the day throughout your life, it's really about making sure that you are embodied and you are feeling like you can really look at what's in front of you, hesitate, take a moment, stay objective, give it some time, no need to make the decision right this moment, and then really making sure you know your yeses, your nos, or what is the answer to what you need to do next in your decision making. So I find people don't often take that little moment, that breather, to actually be like, no, wait a minute, where do I stand? And I notice some people are very spontaneous decision makers, and then they're like, how did I end up here? And then other people are so conservative in their decision making. They're like, have I done anything or gotten anywhere in my life? And those are just two opposites. They're just two different ways. So one of the ways I help, say, my interns make decisions when we're with clients and they're wanting to do everything so right by that client is I always say, if you naturally lead, which is the spontaneous decision maker, how do you learn how to follow and maybe practice following? Like hesitate a moment. If you can just boom, I can do it. You might want to learn to hesitate and take a deep breath. And just a little moment for that decision. Make sure it's right. And if you innately and naturally follow, you might want to see what it is to like, oh, I had a feeling, and just run with it. But I can't just tell people to run with it or hesitate, because it depends on where they stand in decision making. And so, it's a great way to work in healthy collaboration is if the lead learns how to follow and if the followers learn how to lead, well, guess what? That is balancing out the team. And that means we can all as a group work together. And so that's one of the ways, instead of like, you're doing this or you're doing that and you should do this and you should do that. And then people feel bad when they're all wanting to do right. They're all wanting to show up, especially in a mentoring, situation, internship. They want to show up. And so that's one of the ways I help level the playing field and just really build equality is like practice what you don't know. And I think that really plays out in decision making. So when do you need to hesitate and think about it? And when do you need to just follow your heart? And when you feel something, it's like, maybe you should just run with it, because lessons are lessons, whether it came out right or wrong isn't necessarily the objective here. It's more about continuing on. And we are going to not make always the right decisions. You know what I mean? Sometimes we don't make the right decision at all. But does that mean I did something bad? Do I have to put myself down or then say I'm bad? Maybe I just need to be like, okay, how would I do this different next time? And lesson learned. And then you start making decisions according to your lessons, which to me is wisdom. You start making decisions according to your wisdom. So if something's new to me, I take a lot more time to make a decision because I don't have the wisdom to make it too quickly. And if I have good, strong wisdom behind me and I'm in a terrain that I'm really experienced in, I might be able to do that spontaneous decision making all day long because I'm in my comfort zone.
When we make a decision ourselves, we usually feel okay whether that was a good or a bad decision versus based off of what somebody else thinks we should do. So how that relates in birth is if there's a less than desired outcome and we've been active decision makings in our care, active decision makings in how we proceeded, then psychologically it's easier to heal because we were active participants. It's almost as easy as saying if somebody else leaves their socks on the floor, it doesn't feel the same as if we leave our own socks on the floor. Because we have left those socks on the floor, that dish on the table. And we live with that decision of leaving that, but when somebody else does that and disturbs our space, our energy, or however else you want to say it, we're just not as comfortable with it.
That's right.
So when we do make our own decisions, however we make those decisions, if we can be true to ourselves as much as possible, chances are, even if you do make a mistake, you will feel better. And gaining the wisdom, as you're speaking of, right? Gain the wisdom. That's when true wisdom does, able to manifest as well. So decisions, then we move into choices.
That's right.
Because we have so many choices and we have more and more choices. Not that it's very hard to differentiate. So, if you've caught a couple of these other lives, then you're going to see that we're talking a lot about finding your own space to make your decisions from. And that helps you break down choices. There's so many different techniques of how to break those choices down. A very simple one is, again, going back and see what feels best to you. there isn't a wrong choice if you're thoughtful with the decision making. It's just there's so many choices, and one of our main problems is that we put ourselves in a corner that there is no choices. And birth is a big one that people are faced with I just didn't have a choice. I had to do it this way. I had to listen to this person. I had to lay on my back and give birth when my instinct was telling me to do something else. So we have our decision making comes from choices. Sometimes our decision making is liberating us to have more choices. So those two go back and forth a lot.
Yes, they do.
Right? And so then we go into how you feel about that.
Well, when I look at this, or what it brings up that you're talking about, is I'm like, there's also another whole thing around decisions and choices, which is being conscious of how it affects people around us. So then there's also the decisions and choices we make. I could be like, I'm allowed to make this choice. I'm doing it because I'm allowed. And then you're like, but how's that going to affect the people around me? If I then show up late, or and that's a simple example, because we can make some choices in life that have huge disastrous impacts for entire cultures, for entire world, cohesion. And then we start realizing, wow, decision making and choices is actually a really big deal. And we need that staying a little bit in the objective, the true self, as you talk about it. There's the conditioned self and there's the true self. I like that you say that a lot, because it just really puts it in perspective. Where are you? That's a great question for where are you when you go to make a decision or face a choice that you have at your disposal. It's are you making this decision from your conditioned self, or are you making this decision from your true self? And then again, how is it going to relate to the people directly around you, the people directly around them, and then the people directly, behind them, and then globally? So our decisions and choices make a big impact on the people around us. And I think that is an important thing to be considering, because you could be like, I'm allowed to choose.
That's where healthy compromise.
Yes.
We're compromising all the time. And that's can be good and not good, right? Depending on what the compromise is. So you have your deal breakers, and you have little things that, sure, I'd really love to have this for dinner, but I'm going to compromise and we're going to come up with something together, instead of being I get to choose, as you say, right? Because I have free will to choose. Consequences, decision making, truths, those are all take time to build. I think we actually know those things a lot better when we're younger. One of the problems with understanding how to make a choice from your decisions is that when we're really young, we're just taking. We don't actually have it built into us to make a differentiation from what we're learning. And that's great. A long time ago, not even that long ago, when it didn't matter so much.
Yeah.
We weren't going to move so far away from our communities and families, and now it's not honored the same way. We're pushed into learning things that aren't good too often, and then that can cause a lot of problems around the mid ages of 8 and 9, when the pituitary gland is I think it's the pituitary gland.
The pituitary gland connected to the thymus
the
gland.
Thymus gland.
Both. They're both involved
right.
in that.
So that connection helps you think for yourself.
That's right.
And so if you're around people that you ultimately trust and that trust you, when you do start making your own decisions, then they support that because they trust that you have a grounding of foundation that they believe in, that they wanted you in. And so at that age, if we're supported, then we learn how to make those choices and decisions really effortlessly, that we're not affecting other people. It's when we have those conflicts, or we get pushback on our communities or our parents or our peers or our teachers, through those years of teenager years and early adult years, we set our patterns that we don't really realize that are going to affect us much later in life. And decision making is one of those places that it really affects.
That's right.
The gift is that if you are internalizing this and understanding this, then wherever you are in your cycle of life, you can take a pause and reevaluate what you learned, what you rejected learning, and what you interpreted it to be in your teenager years, and then how you applied it in your 20s, and then you learn it in your 30s, and then your power years of your 40s.
That's right.
And then it seems to be more
Wisdom.
of an integration of wisdom and being able to have more fun in your 50s.
Yeah.
And we'll see from there.
Yeah, we'll see from there. But in Ayurveda, when we go through that change of time, menopause, it's called pause to change. They say you're now running on wisdom. So it's like you may not have the same amount of juice and hormones when that thymus and that pituitary were so active at 9 and coming alive and coming into your fire. We now are going, closer and closer back to the ethers. We still have plenty of time, let's hope. Changes for every single person, right? We don't get to decide on that. But if you are still to continue living, you're getting closer and closer to the ethers, and ether and air are drier elements. And so you have to run on wisdom because, you don't have the same physical juice. And that's why in pregnancy, if we take it back to our Birth Alchemy Immersion, that's why in pregnancy, there's so much juicy fluid running through that lymphatic system and working into the tissues. And the reason we have to fill in and get juicy is because we need the buffer to be able to make decisions and choices. And we need that much juice to be able to build a baby, and really have something to give and grow and develop. And that's what our decisions and choices give us. They give us growth and development. I want to take one moment to talk about something in Ayurveda that is ultimately how they see choice, and it's actually a little bit of a practice. You've heard me talk about this many times, and it relates to the head and the heart piece that was in our other video that if you haven't seen, you should watch it. Every time we breathe, we have choice. And there's something very powerful for me, the rebel in us. I'm like, I have choice every single time I breathe. I'm in control of my choices. I still want to be conscious of them. I want to give consideration to my choices. But wow, that was very impressive to me when I was learning it. I was like, every time I breathe, I get to choose. And I get to choose to either not take in an experience that isn't working for me, and I can keep breathing it out. And it's the use of breath. Or what if what's in me, because the inhale is about expanding and collecting oxygen, what if what's in me is amazing and juicy and inspiring? Well, you want to take a deep breath and you want to send that to the top of your head as we expand in the inhale. And when you exhale, you want to send that down to every single one of your glands, because our inhale is about our chakras spinning and working together as a unit. And our exhale is about sending those chakra energetic messages to our physical glands. So if you want to safeguard your physical body, and if you really want to feel like you're in control of your decisions and choices, it's really about you releasing what you don't need and don't want to receive. That's a choice. And then when something feels good, how are you going to let that become the juice that spins you further and further into the world? And we were actually talking about this last night, how people, I say, I notice people will be really positive and then all of a sudden they'll and then the negative's there. And I'm always like, if we could just learn how to hold positive a little bit longer and keep the wheel of positive spinning, but we give up that choice so easily. And then we go into the ands, ifs, and buts, the shoulda, woulda, couldas, and we kind of lose track of feeling like we know what a good decision or choice is. So I just want to remind us that every time you breathe, you have choice. And you can either let it go on the exhale and be like, this doesn't belong to anyone, this is not going to serve anyone, I'm moving it. Or you can send it down to your body if it's really juicy and inspiring and healthy. And you can actually start spinning your wheel of positive choice and decision making in a different way. And then how long can you hold it is what I always say to people. I try to give myself little, goals in the day. When I have something super great that happens, I just feel it, I'm in it, I breathe it in, and then I try to always say, okay, for how long can you keep this good feeling going? Like, how long can you keep it going? And that way I'm more effortless in my decisions and choices, and I actually think about more people around me. I notice I think about more people around me when I'm happy and I'm healthy. And when I'm down in the dumps and I'm kind of calling myself out or being mean to myself or whatever the deal is for the day or the moment, I actually don't think about other people. And then I'm losing track of my true choice making. There's something about that just feels like an important thing to consider, that, bearing witness, we use it a lot in meditations and, subtle energy worlds, but it's nice to kind of know, what does that really mean? Or how do you put that into action? It's breath. It's giving a moment to just breathe. And you don't have to decide right now until you have the truth of how you want to move forward and what choice you want to make.
Yeah, so we have choices in actions, and we have choices in internal actions, external actions and internal actions. And something that was sparked in me listening to you was how you feel better, and how long you're going to feel better. And that's when the oxytocin comes in. Oxytocin is what gets us through so much, and it gets us through birth. And it gets you to that aesthetic feeling after baby's born. And when you're disturbed, look how easy it is to be disturbed when you have good news and someone comes in the room with a frown on their face. It can take it all away. So imagine that's in our best spaces without having to make big, intense choices every second like labor is. And so imagine how it feels when you're in that vulnerable spot.
That's right.
It's a choice to decide to feel a certain way. And a really perfect example is I almost always hear at the beginning of a pregnancy, well, I'm kind of nervous about the birth. And as the pregnancy goes, the wording changes to I'm excited about the birth. And that's a choice, one. But it's actually the same thing that's happening in your brain. Excitement and nervousness looks exactly the same. So you have a choice to decide to stay in nervousness or to transform your thoughts and patterns into excitement, which I think is really cool.
Yes.
And, another really simple example of that is when you smile, you push off oxytocin. How do you smile through a hard birth? You stick a pencil in your mouth and it actually does the exact same thing as a true smile. So these are the choices that we make and how simple our bodies are.
Yeah.
Of transforming, and how complicated we make our bodies and emotions by choosing to decide that they're complicated. Because who would think that excitement and nervousness would be the exact same thing in your body? And it's just a choice to decide to be excited or nervous. And if we just take a moment to sort of think about times that we were excited, we probably had a little nervousness too.
Yep.
And times that we were nervous, we had a little bit of excitement.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the more that you know, the more excited you can be. The more you're ready to make a good conscious choice, the more excited you'll be. Which pulls us into innate knowing.
Yeah. And that's a big one.
Concept of decisions, choices, and innate knowing to make those choices.
Innate knowing that, we knew when we picked that as one of our concepts here that is really large. You know, it's a large concept and somewhat personal, because innate knowing is not just what do you know, but it also goes back to some of the things we talked in the other videos about. It goes back to safety, you know, being able to be safe enough to use your innate knowing. It also goes back to timing and like, when do you use your innate knowing and when do you leave your knowing to yourself versus like provide it and step forward when something's needed. But innate knowing is really, to me, more soul related. That's how I see innate knowing. It's more about the bigger picture of your soul and your RNA, DNA, and your ancestral self, and where do you come from. And we can't prove where we've been before, you know, so I don't like to spend too much time talking about that. I like to keep it broad because everybody has their own opinions about that too. And I think that if we can't, I don't like to talk about anything definitively that I can't prove.
Yeah, we don't know.
That just means that probably everybody gets to decide and choose. And sometimes I wonder, I don't even need to choose. Like, I don't need to worry about where I go next or where I came from. It's not what we know, so why worry about it? But I do think of the soul, and that I know. We have a soul. We inhabit. You know, we already have a spirit behind us. And then we have the fluids that came together that made us. And we have all the innate knowing that comes from those two people, those two fluids, really, at this point, because I like to think really big in that. And then it made you who you are according to what you needed. There's a reason why as a soul you looked down and saw those fluids or those humans coming together and you were like, I'm picking that contract. Those are my agreements. I'm going to agree to those agreements. And so when I think of innate knowing, I consider just the bigness of our soul and the timing of when we inhabited, and why did we pick the family unit that we have, and trying to see what you can do to really honor and trust your experiences amongst that. Not everybody gets to live to a really old age, but if you do even get to live to being an adult, right? If we're so very lucky to even make it that long, because not everybody does, then it's important to remember that you always have your adulthood that's going to be able to say, what decisions and choices were made then? And how did that make my soul's connection to my innate knowing now? And who do I want to become? So I like to look at that too. Innate knowing is not only what you've experienced, and that's good and bad, but it ends up being, what do you want to do with it?